I love that countdown music. Hello, and welcome to another night of Beverly's Break Room, where we are spilling the tea in the break room on all things career, corporate, business, and the hiring process and all of the things in between. If this is your first time here or your third time here, since this is our third day doing it, my name is Beverly. I'm a chief operating officer and your chief empowerment officer, and I am so excited to be here online with you today. We are going to jump right on in because if you're new here, what we do is I will bring up a topic that has been either on my mind or on the community's mind, and we take a little bit of time to dive deep, talk about the implications as it relates to your career. And I offer my perspective and expertise, having scaled operations in over 10 fields for over a decade. And then there's time at the end for Q&A. So hold on to your questions because if you have some as we get ready to rock and roll here, I want to hear from you. Today's topic is anchoring bias in salary negotiations. One of my most viral videos that I have had to date has been a video that I filmed months and months ago where I was talking about how we lowball employees in the hiring process. It is taught to leaders to lowball in the hiring process. And I know that many of you have felt it. I know people know that it's true, but I confirmed it rather radically last year and it blew up because folks were like, finally, somebody's admitting that this is true. But taking it a step further, comment in the comment section and make sure that you are hearting and that you're liking and you're following so that you can be here for future Beverly's break room so you don't miss a single topic and you can get this gate kept information. If you have never heard of anchoring bias before, it is a real thing in the hiring process that a lot of folks do not realize is impacting them as they are interviewing, as they are negotiating. And there's a lot of conflicting feedback in the career space that is counter to what you actually should be learning in the hiring process, right? Because it's not popular to talk about this. But what is it? Okay. So I'm going to blow this up really quick. By definition, anchoring bias is a cognitive bias where people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive, which is the anchor when making decisions. So in salary negotiations, whoever throws out the first number gets the range for the entire conversation. So this comes from a few key places, and I'm going to, in the YouTube description, include links and resources as well for you to continue to do your deep research so you can learn more about this. But the reason why it's gate kept is because companies train recruiters and hiring managers on this extensively, but employees are told never talk about money first without understanding why that advice benefits the manager and not you. How many times have you seen on social media a career creator telling you, never throw out a number first? Um, Make them tell you this. They tell the number first. They're actually trying to aid you in preventing anchoring bias. If you hear a creator try to tell you to always give the first number so that you're setting the tone, they're setting you up for anchoring bias. I have a graphic here, which can also help kind of signify because anchoring bias happens in a lot of different facets, not just in career. This is a really great picture by helpfulprofessor.com. Again, I will include the resource link in the YouTube description so that you can look at this for further detail. But you can see here, right? I include the definition, but here are some examples. Think about car pricing or pricing in general. A car dealer might first show a buyer a very expensive car. And after seeing that high price, the other slightly less expensive cars seem more reasonable. Now, a lot of times where anchoring bias comes into play is where you'll see products at the store and one product that is literally the same thing, it might be a shampoo bottle, is listed at $30 and you might look at that and go, oh, that's too much. But then you'll see a similar bottle that is of it's the same quality, same whatever, and it'll say $30 slashed and then it'll say 15.99 for now. What are you going to go with? You're going to go with the 15.99 option because it feels like a steal. In salary negotiations, an employer offering a low starting salary might result in the employee counter offering with a figure closer to a low initial figure, right? Because if they start super low and you're like, oh, I'm in the ballpark now, I'm in the game. So I'm going to start I'm going to negotiate. Technically, yes, you're doing the right thing by negotiating, but you have no idea that actually the negotiation room they're playing around with is significantly lower than where they should be negotiating with you. And so what do you do about that, right? Tactically, um and I have some uh more examples here too, because I want you to think about this scenario. You're interviewing for a new role, and the recruiter asks, "What's your current salary?" or "What's your salary expectations?" Right? And when they ask you that question, you would say, maybe in this scenario, you say 65K because that's what you make now. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for what you make now. The recruiter says we can offer 70,000. That might be a significant increase to you. You might be like, "Great, I'm making more than what I was making at my previous organization, so I win and I feel good about that." Right? But here's what happens. What you didn't know is that their budget for the role was 75 to 95. So by anchoring yourself at 65K, you just cost yourself 5 to $25,000 annually. The impact of that is over a 5-year period at that company, that 25,000 to $125,000 in lost wages, not counting the compounding effect on future raises and retirement contributions, is what's at stake. And marginalized employees get hit harder by this because there are studies that support, and I will put these studies again in the YouTube description for you to refer to. But there are studies that support that women and people of color are statistically not only paid less in prior roles so that their anchor starts lower, but they're also less likely to negotiate, right? Plus, a lack of network access means less information about market rates, less information about how to play ball. And then cultural conditioning to be grateful for offers makes pushback harder. I had a person who's a member of our community who was talking with me about this very thing. She's from Latin America, and she was talking to me about, "Beverly, how do I gain the confidence to feel comfortable and confident with negotiating?" Because where I come from at her country, we are taught to be grateful, to keep our head down, to to be really, really uh thoughtful about how we approach our leadership. We're told not to rock the boat, and that benefits the company. It doesn't benefit you, right? So in the comments and the chat, has this happened to you where you have negotiated, you're really feeling good about it, only to find out later, whether that be through somebody at the organization, maybe that's after you've done market research, you realize like, "Oh shoot, uh I might have right?" And then what happens? It impacts morale because you're not feeling appreciated. You're not feeling you're not feeling like you're being paid your value, but they won because that anchor now has been set. And once that anchor sets, and I made this analogy in yesterday's break room where I said, one person coming in this scenario, right, is coming in at 70K, but the next person that's on their same team, same job title, same everything, well, they negotiated in line with some of the tactics I'm going to share with you today. And now they're coming in at 75, 80, 90, 95K, 100K for the same job. And if you are not negotiating in the interview process, I am telling you this is lost opportunity because they're counting on you to fall victim to the anchoring bias that is pervasive in corporate. They're counting on you to not think that there is a bigger budget. And because a lot of folks don't teach the tactics on how to actually negotiate, as a chief operating officer, I've committed myself to teaching you these things because if it's already in the budget, right, there shouldn't be a problem with spending that on quality employees who you're excited about. But again, right, with anchoring bias, a lot of leaders think, well, if we can get them for cheap, why not try? But you and I both know that you are not cheap. Okay. And shouldn't be treated as such. Um, so where does that lead us? Tactic one is to flip the anchor. If you are in the interview process, whether that be, you're currently unemployed and looking for opportunities, or you're in a career pivot, or you're looking to pivot in the future, this one is really important. When you flip the anchor, you never give a number first. You make them anchor. Now, it is a realistic thing to say that sometimes this isn't possible. Sometimes you may try this tactic and they're going to rebuke back and they're going to push because they don't want to be the person to give the anchor. And there's a reason for that because they know what they're doing. So if you feel like you've said, and a common thing that people will coach you to say is, when you're asked, what are your salary expectations? You'll be coached to say, I'd love to hear what you've budgeted for this role, or I'm looking for fair market rate. And what range are you working with? Or before I throw out a number, can you share the band for this position? These are all great phrases that you can use to negotiate in your salary expectation. And if you are looking for tactics to be able to negotiate, starting with making them anchor first is critical. Because if they do take the bait and you say, before I give you my target number, can you please share the band that you have allocated for this position? If they give you a number, bingo, you are now in the right ballpark to be able to figure out, okay, what am I actually working with versus giving them a number. And again, they might have had 20, 30, 40K more. But now that you've anchored yourself, they're going to try to keep you close to where you said. Um, and in this context, when it's important about being strategic. Companies have the salary band information. They're choosing not to share it. They know how much they have allocated. And you may not realize that in many states, they're legally required to share ranges anyway. And more states are starting to require this, where they have to share in their job description. But where you and I may have seen this, right, is how many of you have seen companies and their job descriptions share insane ranges? The ranges are crazy. It's like 95K to 400K. You and I both know that that's not a real range. And a lot of companies very seedily, it's very seedy behavior to do it that way because they're trying to meet the law and expectations of the law without actually, being realistic. So then what happens? People who are expecting a higher end salary, that's where then on the back end, they tell you, well, actually, we're really looking for somebody in this range. Well, then why did you advertise this in this way? Well, it's because they don't want to get struck by labor laws and an upcoming employment law. So wherever you can, do try to get them to anchor themselves first and practice at home. Practice the language that feels the most natural to you because discomfort is a price um to pay, right? If you're willing to stand up for yourself. And if they refuse to share, that's a red flag about transparency and fairness. And you should know that going into your negotiation phase. If they're really not trying to tell you or they feel uncomfortable and you can tell they're uncomfortable, that's a red flag, my friend. The second tactic is anchor with data. Now, you and I, if you've been in this community, I always talk about metrics and documentation, how critical they are. If you have been forced to give a number first, so if they're like, we really just want to hear your target because, it'll really help us understand, blah, 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 blah. Anchor at the top of the market range with evidence. On my website, beverlydines.com, I have the C Suite Secrets interview playbook where I have the entire calculator available for you. So you do not have to make this up on the fly. I walk you through exactly how to accurately tabulate your um your negotiation metrics. And in this regard, right, and how to research as well. I put that in the documentation. So you can research using Glassdoor, Levels AI, Pay Scale, salary.com, Insights, Google for what it's worth, right? There's a lot of different ways you can do that networking. But then beyond that, beyond market research, you have probably heard me before talk about base and floor. Remember, they're your base level expenses. These are the expenses that are your floor is your expenses that you need to keep the lights on. These are the things that I need in order to keep my life running and my house running. The base is your lifestyle expenses. And then when you look at the market data, again, you are taking the data and you're going at the high end of that, right? So you want to come at it again, research, because think about it. If you're coming in as an entry level employee and you do the research and in your particular field, and the research tells you that anybody in that field, in that industry, in that region, and that state could be making anywhere between 100,000 to 300,000, but you've been only in that position a year. Don't come at these folks for $300,000. You're going to be disappointed, because that's not how it works. Um, but what uh what you can do, right, is you can think about what's reasonable, what makes sense based off of your experience, that deep research, and then you'll say to them, based on market research for this role in the city with my years of experience, and state your specific years of experience and your skills that are relevant to the work that you're going to be doing. The range that I am looking for this opportunity is, and then you give that high end range. So if you and I know that you'd be happy with 70,000, you're going to tell them 85. And you can say, I'm the range I'm looking for is anywhere between 85 to 105,000. I'm targeting the higher end given my insert specific achievement or credentials. That's where those metrics come really importantly into play. So what happens now is you've set a high anchor backed by data, which is harder to dispute. You've positioned yourself as informed and strategic, and you've named your value explicitly. But make sure you're doing your research for every role every time, especially when you're in the interview process, because it does change depending on the industry, the type, the size of the company, the expectations of the role. And then make sure that you screenshot your sources and you have them available to you if they push back and say, according to our market research, it's actually, be prepared to say, from what I was able to gather from my data, I'm happy to share those resources as well as, and then go back to your experience. Um, you can say, this feels on par with what I've researched. I'm happy to share the data with you, because then you're not bulking. You're not going to back down, right? Um, and it's really important that you take that time so you feel confident and you practice for this. Um, and make sure that all of the achievements that you share are quantifiable. As a COO, I have had the privilege of interviewing at this point probably thousands of people. And on top of that, I've seen all types of ways people have negotiated. And one of the ways in which folks do not do this well is when they're coming back because maybe, the staff is saying, well, we'd really love to hear what's in range for you. And they come back and they say, oh, I'm really looking for, and they'll bring up it feels arbitrary to the staff, right? They'll say, I'm really looking for this. And they don't talk about any data backing. They don't talk about anything else. They just say, I'm really looking for this number. Well, you may think, well, that should be enough, right? Nope, because the difference between that employee and employee that says, hey, listen, I recognize what the market is. I also saw recently in my research with the company that you guys are in a pre-seed round. So I want to be, of course, cognizant of where you all are growth stage wise. This is what I'm looking for based off of, what I know about the organization, the industry, and my role, as well as my experience. You now sound strategic. You now sound aligned as well, because pre-seed, and let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video on the different types of companies, because they're not all, if they're the way in which you will interview for a company that's pre-seed or seed round is incredibly different than the way in which you'd interview with a company that is series A, series B, and beyond. And so, if they're a pre-seed round, you might have a different number because they may not be, they may not be revenue generating. They might still have angel investors, right? So those are things to consider, and definitely comment if that's something that you'd be, interested in learning more about. Tactic number 3, okay, is reframe past salary questions. So, like I mentioned before, in many states, it's 21 plus states in the United States, salary history questions where they ask you salary history questions are illegal. In 21 plus states, it is illegal for the organization to ask you what you're making currently. So know your rights. Everywhere else, if you're operating in states, and look up your specific state relating to this. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I'm just stating the fact that in many states in this country, they cannot ask you outright what you're making. But everywhere else, redirect them. So if they ask you, it's just very inappropriate anyway. It's just a really poor practice to ask an employee what they're making when they're interviewing for your company. But if you are asked, well, can you tell us what your current salary is? You can state the following either A, oh, I am protected by NDA, so I'm unable to provide that information at this time, but I'm happy to discuss fair compensation for this role based off of market value. Immediately redirect, and you can, even if you haven't signed an NDA, you can blame it on that. You can say, hey, I'm sorry, it's protected information. I'm unable to disclose that. The second thing you can say is my current compensation includes equity and benefits that don't translate directly. So I'd rather focus on the comprehensive value that I'd bring as well. So what you're highlighting to them, right, is that if this is relevant, right, is that you're coming from an organization that gave you a robust benefits package as well that was included in your compensation strategy. The reason why this is important is because going back to what I said before about companies that are pre-seed, series, seed round, all of those, if they don't have a ton of working capital, meaning they don't have a lot of liquid cash for employees, but they really are excited about you. You saying, well, what also is attractive to me is benefits and PTO and, other things that are not necessarily cash flow. That is actually very attractive to organizations. And again, as somebody who I've been in so many different interview processes in so many different industries, I can tell you our ears light up when someone says, cash wise, like I'm flexible. What I really care about is 401k matching, or I really care about PTO because XYZ, or I really care about those are things that oftentimes, especially if an organization is really excited about you, they will figure out whatever ways they can to accommodate you there. And then the third thing you can say is, I'm looking to make a move that reflects market rate for my skills, not just a incremental increase from my current role. Now, this one's a bit saucy. Now, you might have seen my saucy interview questions series. That's a little saucy. You're telling them, let me be very clear. I'm not in the mood for incremental increases. The next move I make is going to be a jumper. I'm going to jump up. Okay. So when that happens, right, you want to make sure that if you're going to say it, you got that energy about you because it is a little saucy. But it can be an important way to communicate to them, like, I'm not the one to be lowballed. Okay. You've declined without being confrontational in all of these scenarios. You've redirected the value, not the history, right? And you've also signaled that you know your worth. Everything comes back to strategy. You have signaled, I know what the heck I'm talking about. Leave me alone. Okay. And if they push back hard, right? Ask yourself, do I want to work for someone who violates labor laws or disrespects boundaries in the first conversation before you've even worked there? Do I want to work for somebody who is fighting so hard against me being paid what I'm worth? If they are haggling the heck out of you, that is a crimson flag. And the sooner that you recognize that, the sooner you can take that step back and say to yourself whether or not, A, this is a transition job, because I understand the realities of the market right now. Unlike a lot of other creators, I have been unemployed for almost a year. I was employed for a while during the pandemic. So I empathize with the recognition of, listen, money's got to come from somewhere. So if they are pushing back super hard, but the check is fine enough, and you are making that covenant to yourself that this is a transition job, okay, but don't break that covenant. Don't put a ring on that company. But if you are not in a rush and you are really looking for that next pivot opportunity and they're haggling you, remember, ask yourself, do I want to work at a company that is haggling me this much for my check? Because that is just the beginning. It's just the beginning. There's more to come. Trust me, if they feel that comfortable with talking you out of your check. And this is especially critical for those of you who have been underpaid due to discrimination, due to being passed over, due to bullying. Do not let that anchor from that previous organization with all of that foolishness stop you from getting the opportunities that you deserve. Okay. So today we have covered anchoring bias in salary negotiations because it's a real term, it's a defined term. And like I said, I'm going to share links on YouTube for you to review and then look up, because these are things that are often taught to recruiters and hiring teams so that they can get folks as cheaply as possible. But in this new era, as we enter 2026, we're not playing. We're not playing. So now I want to go into the questions, right? These are frequently asked questions about this bias and what to do about it. One of the number one questions that I get as a chief operating officer when I am empowering and encouraging people to negotiate salaries is question number one, which is what if they withdraw the offer because I won't either because they don't like the number or I won't give my current salary to them. They were never going to pay you fairly. If they withdraw the offer from you after you have negotiated from a place of strategy, from a place of empowerment, you have done so thoughtfully, you have done so with research, they were never going to pay you fairly. This was only going to be the beginning of a lot of other issues for you. Because think about it, if this is how they feel about trying to bring you on, imagine how they're going to treat you when you're advocating for a promotion. Imagine how they're going to treat you when you're advocating for a raise, right? That's the attitude. It's, well, if they withdraw, they were never going to treat you fairly. A company that rescinds an offer over this was planning to lowball you. And so you just saved yourself from an employer that does not value transparency, first and foremost. And this filter works in your favor because while it is painful now, especially if you're trying to get out of a current job and you're just waiting for that next opportunity. And maybe you were excited about it, but they aren't playing ball with you. I want to validate it is painful being excited about an opportunity and then they play in your face. But it is protection also from further nonsense that you may inherit being at an organization that does not value transparency. Companies that operate this way also have other red flags that you discover later. And I know that it's not fun to think about, but it's the truth, right? Again, if this is how they're treating you when you're setting a boundary now, it's a precursor to how they're treating they were going to be treating you as an employee, right? The next question that I get often about this topic is I'm an entry level employee with no leverage. How can I negotiate when I just need a job? I think that it is really important that if you are an entry level employee or maybe you're earlier in your career and you just need a role, you just need an opportunity, that you decompartmentalize quickly your value versus your experience. Because you just finished a course of study, or maybe you were freshly out of college. You've been out of college a couple of years, or maybe you've recently pivoted. So maybe you've had a previous career, but you're new in the industry. You deserve, you know what? I'm going to ask you, why don't we all look at our bills? Why don't we just take a quick look at our bills? Do your bills need paying? And beyond that, do you deserve to have hobbies? Do you deserve to have interests? Do you deserve to have your mental health taken care of? Because I don't care if you're an entry level employee or if you've worked at a company for 30 years. You absolutely deserve to negotiate. And you have a lot more leverage than you think. The market rate doesn't change based off of what can feel like desperation because of your situation and your very real reality. That's why I talk so frequently about transition jobs, because if it gets to the point where it's like, listen, I need to take something right now to keep my family fed and everything else, I get that. Take the job with confidence because you know that this is going to be a bridge role for you. But if you are act currently at an organization and you are just waiting for that next best opportunity, yo, you have a lot more leverage than you think you do. And entry level roles have market ranges too. Research them. Research. I can't. I've had entry level roles that I have built at companies that started at 90K and went up to 110, 115. Like they have ranges as well. Your leverage is that they chose to interview you out of hundreds of applicants. They chose you. They got excited about your resume. They got excited about your work. They got excited about the type of things that you do. They got excited about you. That is your leverage. They're hype. That becomes the root point here, right? And negotiating doesn't mean being aggressive. There's often this perception that if you negotiate, you're suddenly being difficult. No, it means that you're asking informed questions that you're going to need in order to work there. And even if it's a $3,000 to $5,000 increase at an entry level rate, that compounds over your career. And it also sets a tone psychologically for you that you were comfortable with advocating for yourself. You were comfortable with standing up for yourself. And nothing can replace that because the more that you practice that muscle, the more that you'll feel comfortable doing it throughout your career, right? The worst they can say is no. That's something that my great grandmother used to say. The worst they can say is no. But you won't know if you don't ask. You won't know if you don't come ready with your strategy. And wouldn't you rather be able to say, "Wow, I got this opportunity and was able to negotiate another 5 grand, 10 grand. I feel great about that." You should try. The third question that I get frequently is, what if I anchor too high and they think I'm unrealistic or entitled? If your number is backed by market data, that is not unrealistic. It's informed, right? And good leaders, good organizations, strong recruiters, frankly, who have been doing this in their, as career recruiters, career HR professionals, they expect it. They expect informed um salary bands. So when you anchor high with evidence, you're demonstrating research skills and self-advocacy. Entitled often can feel and be coded as I won't you won't be coded for won't accept being underpaid quietly. And if somebody says, "Oh, aren't you entitled because you're not accepting being underpaid?" A, those people do not need to be around you. They don't need to be near you or around you. Full stop. Okay? Um Companies expect negotiation, y'all. They expect it. They build buffer into initial offers because they expect it. Again, like I said before, people from marginalized backgrounds are disproportionately labeled difficult for the same negotiation tactics white men use successfully and either maybe not as successful because I don't want to diminish anyone's experience. But it's the truth that in data supports that white men typically when they negotiate are more successful than those of marginalized backgrounds. Have audacity with a capital A. And if they think that your market rate is unrealistic, they're either underfunded because that could be a reality too that they're trying to hide. They might be underfunded and they can't afford you, or they're undervaluing the role, which are problems for you. Because if they're under evaluating the role, that means that when it comes time for self advocacy, when it comes time for you to do your job, or maybe you're trying to speak up about things, or you're trying to get your project seen, or whatever, they're telling you how they feel about you, right? The fourth question I get frequently is, well, what if I've already told the recruiter my current salary or the salary range I'm looking for earlier in the process? Did I just screw myself over? You may have made it harder, but you can still recover from it. I'm not here to sugarcoat it. It can be a little bit harder if you've said early in the process, like, hey, I gave them a number and it's like super, super low and it's not market rated. Maybe you panicked. I know this has happened to me a lot in my career where I had earlier, like really early in my career before I had really taken the time to do a lot of this research, right? I would panic when I would be asked that number because again, you don't want to be labeled as entitled. You want to come across as all of those, things, right? And so you can recover though. First, you need to acknowledge it because the recruiter might get a little frustrated with you. And I've been on the back end having led recruitment and hiring and HR teams. I've been on the back end of this when somebody this says later, actually, the range is this. And I've seen my recruiters be like, oh my God, because it is stressful when it is vastly different than what was originally discussed because they brought you through the process because it was felt like the company could afford you. So what you need to do is you need to acknowledge it by saying, I shared my current salary earlier, but after learning more about this role's scope, I do want to discuss fair market compensation relating to this opportunity. You could also reframe it around additional responsibilities by saying this role includes XYZ that my current position does not. And so I am looking at the higher end of the range, and then list that number. You could also emphasize total comp so that this goes back to, I'm comfortable with this base salary, but would love to evaluate and discuss with you, equity, benefits, growth potential, PTO, whatever else, relates to there. And then use that opportunity as a learning moment because next time, don't just answer the question off the cuff. Don't just, if you get panicked, nope, because ideally now you've seen our session today. You've been in the break room with me. And so you're going to come prepared with that strategy. But you can recover, and I've seen it happen. And then the last question before I open it up to the audience is how do I negotiate when I don't have other offers to use as leverage? First and foremost, I'm going to ask the audience this. Do we know what offers you do or don't have if you don't tell us? Do we know? The answer is no. We don't know, right? You may know that, but if you're standing in confidence, standing in your truth, we don't know that, right? So you don't need other offers. You need confidence and you need that market data. Other offers may help if you're negotiating for senior roles, but they're not required for negotiation. Your leverage is the time and money they've invested in interviewing you. Your leverage is the cost of restarting their search if you walk away. The leverage is market rate exists whether you take other offers or not. So data aside, like it exists, whether you tell them about the data or not, and go back to value based on what I'd contribute in this specific area. I'm looking for this specific number. If you do have other interviews in process, but not offers, you can mention I'm in late stage conversations also in my process a little bit elsewhere, but I would really love to move quickly with this organization if we can align on compensation. So then what that communicates is that there are other people who are barking up the chain. They're barking up the tree, I should say. They're excited about me. So, but I'm really excited about y'all. And I've seen people play this seamlessly where they're like, and actually to the point where a senior leader one time called the candidate and said, We are getting to the point where we would really love to offer, but we want to make sure and feel confident that you're ready to say yes if we can align on the number." And that person's been like, "Yeah, they're telling you like, "Okay, we'll figure it out," but then you need to say yes, right? So that's really important as well. Those are some pretty frequent FAQs. Um, and I'm gonna come here. If you have any questions, definitely put it in the chat and I'll answer here. Are you still able to negotiate if you gave a number within the posted range? Absolutely. It goes back to what I said before. If you already gave a number earlier in the process, you can go back and say, "Oop, and this happens where that they'll ask you what your salary expectations are very early in the process, and then you find out that you're going to not only be doing your job, you're going to be doing Sue's job and Kevin's job and Kyle's job. And that's a good opportunity for you to, again, not make it about you made a mistake or you're, feeling regretful. You can just say, "Hey, I'm really excited for the opportunity. I'm excited to dive in." Upon reflection and hearing, what's expected and list what's expected, these current responsibilities, conjoined with, what's within the job description. I am really looking for this number here. And then you can list the higher end range. Absolutely. Ooh, somebody asked, how much back and forth is haggling? This is a great question. If you are in the interview process and the organization is haggling back and forth with you and you want to know like when enough is enough, here's a couple of signs to pay attention to. The first is if more than two times, really, unless it is a senior position, because sometimes there's other, like I said before, there's equity, there's benefits, there's all kinds of stuff that is discussed at the top, then it really isn't so much haggling as it is trying to align on what makes the most sense because you're pretty confident you're going to come on board. But let's say you're not in that position and they are just going back and forth with you. After two times in negotiating a number, if they're still like going back, so let's say they put 70K on the table, you're looking for 85K, they come back at 80K, which is a 10K jump, right? And they're like, we really can't budge here. You have a choice to make. You can either A, acknowledge that they came up 10 grand in this scenario, right? And say, okay, They came up 10 grand, but I really need 85K because this goes back to base and floor calculations. You know what you can or cannot walk away from. What will keep the lights on at your house and keep your food in the refrigerator and keep you fed, right? What your lifestyle expenses are. Because again, if you're currently in a job and you're looking to pivot, do not negate your lifestyles because these are costs that are going to impact you later. If your lights are on and you're fed, but now you're working at this job and also you can't go anywhere, you can't travel, you can't do what you want to do. So make sure when you calculate that it's accurate because if you know that your floor is 85K, something went wrong when you negotiated to begin with. Because why are you negotiating below your floor? That is a number you cannot go below. So if you told them 85K, you gave them the wrong number if that was your floor. The base of that should have been 95K or 100K because I always advise people to add at least 10,000 to their floor. So that's the first thing. The second thing is if let's say you've done that in 85K and the scenario works and they brought it up to 80. Well, your floor in the scenario might have been 75. It might have been 70. So you're actually doing pretty well, all things considered. You can ask yourself, do I want to keep fighting for it or do I feel okay? Only you know that. I would recommend though that if after 3 times the organization is still fighting back, like let's say you gave it one more go after the second time they came back and you're like, is there anything more we can do? PTO, benefits, things like that. And they're like, no, like this is where we're at. Anything more than that is excessive. And remember what I said earlier in our talk today, that they are telling you now how they feel about you and how much they value you and the role. So if they're really, I mean, if they're nickel and diming it to the point where it's like you asked for 75K and they're like, we really can't do more than 70, we really can't do more than 69. Well, you said 75. You and I both know they can probably do it. They probably can. But and depending on that company though, like I said, depending on what round they're in and where they are size-wise, they may not be able to do it. But if you were transparent at the beginning of the process and you said 75K and they come back at you with 60, pay attention to that. Because there comes a point where enough is too much. And sometimes I will tell you, I have had to do this several times in my career where I've had to say, you know what, I really appreciate the opportunity, but it doesn't seem like we're aligning on compensation. And I was really excited to join the team. But I also want to respect where you and the organization currently stands as it relates to your salary bands. Put it back on them. This has nothing to do with you. And if you put it back on them, you're not coming across as disrespectful. You're not coming across as a know-it-all, whatever it is. You're just telling the truth. It just appears that, you're basically telling them very politely and professionally that you're too expensive. But it's a red flag if they keep fighting back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Um, One question here says, how quickly do you wrap up an interview once you realize that they're not financially aligned? I really like how this community member is moving. They're like, I'm not trying to waste my time. How quickly do I wrap this up? Because I'm not trying to communicate with y'all anymore if you're not financially aligned. What I will always say is you never know who knows someone. And I will tell you that there have been a few times in my career, believe it or not, where somebody who bowed out gracefully from the interview process, but they were still working in the industry. Um, Later on wound up connecting with the organization when another job opening opened up and they were able to get onboarded at the organization. This was early in my career. So, if you find out financially that they're not aligned and they're not really willing to work with you, I would say bow out immediately, but gracefully. So, if they call you after that most recent interview and they tell you that's what they're willing to do, but that they want to move on to a third round interview, um, and because they're not willing to go higher than a certain number, you can say, oh, that I don't want to wait, I don't want to take any more of your time, and I most certainly want to ensure that we're aligned on process. And you're telling me, and make sure they repeat it, ask the recruiter, so just to confirm, you're telling me that you and the team are unable to accommodate, and then reiterate the range if they make you do it first, based off of the tactics, right? We discussed. You can say, just can you reiterate that for me? And if they reiterate that they cannot meet your expectations, you absolutely in that same conversation can say, okay, well, when in that case, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for the interview. It was amazing getting to meet the team. Right now, that's not in alignment with what I'm looking for at this time. And I want to respect your process as you're looking for the right fit. That's it. And now you recuse yourself, you move on, and now you're not wasting your time or waiting for them to change their tune because a lot of people do that. A lot of people will say, "Okay, well, because again, they're looking for that opportunity and they expect that they can negotiate later on in the process, but there's where that questioning comes into play of like, "Well, wait, you told us earlier that this was okay. So if it's really not okay, don't expect at the end for it to drastically change. They may try to negotiate with you at the end if they're really excited about you, but 9 times out of 10, it's not gonna be vastly different from what their original number was, that they gave you at the beginning. So bow out gracefully, and then, that way you're not burning any bridges, and you never know, there might be an opportunity in the future that you can apply to again, and they remembered you being respectful and also being considerate of the process, right? And interested in the organization. Somebody just said Beverly for Congress. Thank you. That's so kind. I'm trying to put y'all on game. I'm trying to educate, and empower because there's a lot that happens behind closed doors. Um, and like I said, make sure you're following on Instagram, subscribe to my YouTube channel where you can see this again, and be able to get review the whole rundown. But these are the types of things that are often gate kept. And it's an intentional practice in recruitment and in HR to do this anchoring, so that we can see what folks are thinking. And again, where this is really disparaging is if you are somebody who again you're maybe coming off of a layoff, you're somebody who's coming off of having been treated poorly at another organization, then you're not going to feel confident. You're not going to feel like your best self. So then when it comes to bias, right, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking about putting food on the table. I have some folks in my community who have been unemployed for over a year. Like, that's why I said there's a power in recognizing, okay, this is going to be a transition job because I need some stability right now. Okay. But you have to make that choice. And you have to remember if they made you fight for that money, okay, like in a year, I got to start my pivot plan again because everything is going to be a fight. And listen, I am somebody who has had every experience from haggling like heck to get the title and pay I deserved to getting hired on the spot at the pay I deserved. So I've seen everything and negotiated and so on. So I've seen every way that this can spin. Someone has a question here. What advice would you give someone who's constantly submitting resumes with no takers and they have a fantastic resume? Well, in relation to this hiring market, I will tell you that, and let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video on the different types of hiring markets because I do not see anyone talking about this, and I think it is such a detriment to continue doing content in this hiring market, not talking about all of the there's 4 different hiring markets. And the main hiring market that everyone knows about is the one that everybody's applying to, which is the application submittal hiring market, where you submit your application and you on LinkedIn, on Indeed, on Monster, wherever, right? That's one hiring market. But then there's the second hiring market, which is through your network. And there's a specific way that you navigate that hiring market system. Then the third hiring market is your external network. And then the fourth hiring market is through organic cold outreach because of your personal brand. Um, and The way in which you navigate those markets are very different. So for somebody who is constantly submitting resumes with no takers, that is by design. If you are submitting resumes and you're not getting opportunities and you have revised your resume thousand majillion times, you've paid a lot of money to get resume reviews, you've done all the things, it is by design. By 2036, the resume writing industry alone will eclipse $3.6 billion in revenue. Think about it. If everybody is operating in one hiring market, then that means that the second, third, and fourth hiring markets are not saturated. If they're not saturated, then the people who know how to operate in those markets are going to get opportunities quicker. So my recommendation to you would be to start digging in to your internal network. And when we talk about networking is not just people who are connected with you on LinkedIn. Networking could be your effing neighbors. Networking can be your freaking family members. Networking can be your friends. I cannot tell you how many people I know have gotten jobs from their friends just by saying it at the lunch table. Now, people in upper echelons, the elite senior leaders, we know to do this. We know, we're taught, we're mentored. Where if you're looking for an opportunity, the next time you do a happy hour with your buds, you mention, oh, if anybody has any openings for, let me know. Because at a lot of organizations, there's incentivization to refer your friends or refer your colleagues. People get money. At one company I worked for, you got $500 for every entry level employee you referred that got hired. I think it was like $1,000 for every mid level, and then as high as I think it was like $1,700 for every C-suite member or senior leader and up that you refer. At a lot of companies, there's incentivizations that people don't even know about. So it's mutually beneficial, which is why a lot of folks know to do it. So if you're currently interviewing and or currently submitting your resume and you're not getting any bites, it's time for you to investigate the secondary hiring markets because there's 4 of them. And then the first thing to do is looking at your network. Who is actually and who's around me? Go to your friends. Hey y'all, is anybody at your organization hiring? For example, if your friend works retail, let's say you work in marketing and your friend works retail. Okay. Let's say they're a regional manager in retail. You may think to yourself, well, I don't want to work retail. You don't have to work retail. Don't retail conglomerates have marketing departments? Ask your friend, hey, I'm in the market for a marketing role. Do you mind, taking a look internally if there's any internal hiring boards for a marketing opportunity? And just like that, your friend goes and looks, oh my gosh, we're actually hiring for a marketing coordinator right now. I'm going to put in a good word for you. Do you mind applying? This is the link to do it. Da, 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 da. I'm telling you, senior leaders, elite, that's how they move. That's how they mentor also for their people to move. So start there. And then in the future I can make videos on all of those different hiring markets. Um I did not do my sponsor video today, so I will just shout them out. First, this episode is sponsored by Create the Door. My book, Create the Door, is about career pivoting. It is not just a career support book, it is a revolutionary book because I'm giving you the 8-step system that I use to pivot in 10 different fields throughout my career, as well as invest in my passions and get paid for them. And so, if you are looking for an opportunity to do so, to create your own doors, go to Amazon, go to my website. Create the Door is the book for you. And it is short and tactile on purpose because if you're looking to create your own opportunities, maybe you want to become an entrepreneur, maybe you want to create your own side hustle, whatever it is a tactical guide so that you can get started today. And it's called Create the Door. Additionally, this episode is sponsored by Foxy. Go to www.foxy.com to rediscover creativity, which is your birthright. They have over 64,000 students and folks just like you who love to explore their creativity. If you are a new beginner, meaning you've never picked up a crayon in your life, all the way up to maybe returning to art after putting it aside for a while, foxy.com is there for you. And I always like to say this because, again, you never know unless you know that On my website, I have a ton of resources. So if you are looking for that the calculator that I mentioned, and all of the different things. I have the entire listen, if you are in the interview process, y'all, I have the entire playbook. I put the entire playbook, what hiring managers look for and how to research and how to calculate all this. Like everything is in this playbook. I made it super, super easy and it's on my freaking website. So please go there. Because it is there on purpose. So, for to support you, right? The other thing though is that if you have a specific situation that you want support with, I have a ton of different ways you can work with me directly, whether you can book an empowerment session with me, or if you want to jump right in, I have a hiring market hack pack. Remember, I talked about those 4 different hiring markets. I help you figure out the best way for you to integrate into those hiring markets, as well as a mock interview mastery session. Since we're talking about the interview process, where you will literally get interviewed by me. I do have a theater minor, and so I put on the persona of the person who would be interviewing you based off of what you are studying for. You get feedback, you get documentation, you get recordings. It is very robust. And all of my resources are payment plan eligible to make them as accessible as possible for you. So, please head to my website, beverlydines.com, so that we can work together and you do not have to feel alone because you have a partner in your process. I see a few questions here. I mentioned networking with those you know. What if you've been out of touch and haven't having socialized networked in years? How do you get back in the game organically? What a great question. A couple of recommendations I would have off the bat. The first is with things you like to do. A lot of folks will advise you by like going to conferences, going to whatever. And I also will advise that if you're in the game, but if you've been out of it for a while, the easiest way to network is to rediscover the things that you like to do. So if you like to play sports, join an intramural league for sports. If you love creativity, find a pottery space near you that maybe has or on Facebook or on Threads. Now there's all these event planning apps that have like Meetup and things like that. Go to those sites and see where there are people who are like-minded with the things that you like to do and start going to those meetups. Another way that you can get in the game if you're looking to network professionally is look at nonprofits in your area that are on the professional development side. One really great organization that I have now partnered with before is 1 Million Cups. They are a nonprofit where all they do is they empower business owners. They have them all over the country. They empower business owners to share their business concept, and then the group gets to provide feedback and network and connect. And it's at least in Chicago, where I'm based, it's every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And it's completely free to everyone who attends. There's a lot of nonprofits that have really great concepts for pitch competitions or networking or tech walk is another nationwide organization that literally is exactly what it sounds like. People get together to go on long walks based off of different industries and themes, and you connect and network with people on those walks. So look for those types of organizations that can get your feet wet if you are just getting back into the game, because there's a lot of them all over the country, and it really is helpful when you're trying to get back into it. Um, should relocation salary that's offered as separate from your range of what is acceptable that you will accept when they ask what is the salary that we would like? This is also a really good question. You've been on fire today. It's like everybody, Lowe's, it's me, Brittany, everybody's been on fire. Should relocation, sorry, let me go back up. The nonprofit I mentioned was 1 Million Cups. They're nationwide. I frequent the one in Chicago pretty frequently, at least once a quarter I'm there. There's Tech Walk is another nonprofit that does regular meetups and connection. And there's a lot of nonprofits that do that kind of thing. So definitely look those up and make sure you head to my YouTube, because you can always come back and look at these resources here where this video will be. But when it comes to The relocation assistance, no, that should not be included as part of your salary negotiation, because relocation assistance is nebulous. It varies depending on the organization. Some organizations do not provide relocation assistance, and also it is a temporary. Um, it's a temporary fix for a longer term issue, because if they're saying, "Oh yeah, we'll give you 20K to move here," but then you're not making 20K throughout the year, there's often a lot of stipulations too as to what that's for moving expenses, so on, reimbursements, things like that. You don't want to play that game when it comes to your salary. So I would not include that as part of the package, because what you should be paid is what you deserve to be paid. And with that, that closes us for today's look at us, we flew through the hour today, and hopefully you've walked away with something new, and something, and having learned something new and learned some new tactics. Thank you for the incredible questions and for being on. Make sure you click follow if you're watching on Instagram. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe, give me a like. All of this helps so that I can reach as many folks as possible and help them as they navigate growing in their careers. And again, wanting to get the gate kept tips, the things that are often kept from folks in the hiring process. That is what I am seeking out to do. So thank you so much for being here. And I really appreciate all of your supports. Thank you so much, everyone. Um, I will see you all tomorrow for Wednesday's Beverly's break room at 6 p.m. So I will see you sharp at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And until then, I hope you have an amazing night. And I will see you tomorrow. Thank you all so much.